Hmm. Well, hello again. Welcome back. Hmm. Well, it's a fine day outside. Things are warm. We're hovering mm, just above freezing. So I thought I should make a little video. Hmm. What am I reading? Well, if you can see it, Rick Atkinson, The Guns at Last Light. Marvelous series. This is the third in a trilogy by this fellow. Army at Dawn is the first book, and the second is called The Day of Battle. So they're about the American Army experience in the European theater of the Second World War, which is, it's a good read. He's an excellent writer, well researched. I quite enjoy it. I discovered that in 1944, for example, your average American GI required 7.3 pounds of food per day, 7.3 pounds of munitions per day, and 60.3 uh, pounds of fuel, of gasoline and lubricants per day, just to keep them going. Where would you get such fine detail except in a good book? It's chock full of good lessons on leadership. I've actually come reading an American book. I've come away with a greater appreciation for Montgomery's tactical genius. Maybe not his strategic genius, but his tactical genius. Alamein is a good example, where he prepared his army and he prepared his battle space. He prepared his enemy to lose. Uh, his masterstroke was probably the D-Day invasion. A lot of people forget this, but Monty was actually the battlefield commander of that fight. Overlord was his game, and it was a masterstroke. Market Garden was terrible. He really lost sight of the picture. He failed to secure Antwerp properly in his rear, so you know that probably slowed down the Allied advance into Germany by 2 or 3 months. If Antwerp had been open from October of 1944, I would be willing to bet that the final German offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, would not have happened, simply because the Allies would have been punching before the Germans. But so at the strategic level, at the political level, I think Monty was a bit of a hit and miss. But at the tactical level, certainly at the Army level, at the Corps level, brilliant. I've always admired Patton, and I no less admire him reading this book. That he hasn't changed my high estimation of that man. Um, but it is interesting for me to read a World War II account from the American perspective. I'm more familiar with the British perspective. I've got the 6 volume set by Winston Churchill over here on my shelf. I'm missing the first volume. I think it's in the house. I hope it's in the house. I only have 5 volumes here, but Winston Churchill's personal memoirs um, of the war. We fought in that war for 6 years, so that's a very valuable asset. I learned how to write emails from Winston, and how he writes his memos. So, and he was all about follow up. So this book is fantastic. 10 out of 10. Just stunningly written. Uh, the various battles, especially Monte Cassino or Anzio, you can really feel like you're there. He really does describe the whole thing, the carnage, the inhumanity of it all. So yeah, there's that. Another thing I just started reading for the first time. I haven't gotten deep into this one yet. I bought this just before Christmas. It's called Preaching Christ from the Old Testament by that guy, Sidney Greidanus. Greidanus. Anyway, he's a professor over at that seminary. I can't remember the name of it. It's in Eastern Canada. Hmm. It's the one my pastor went to. Anyway, it's an interesting read. He says a lot of good things. I have not gotten far into it, but yeah, I like what I'm seeing. It's good. The only question I have for this fellow, the only question, which we'll see if he answers the question, does he interact with Jim Jordan or Peter Leithart at all? If you're writing on exegesis, on exegetical concerns in the 21st century, you have to interact with those two guys, especially if you're in the Reformed world. They're giants in that space, so far as I'm concerned. So you have to interact with them, especially Jim Jordan. So we'll see if he does. I don't know if he does, but we'll see. So far, he's got a lot of good things to say, which reminds me of something. Contrary to appearances, I spent 2 years in Bible school. Did not finish, but when I was there, we had an exegetical textbook for our one class, and in one of the early chapters, I remember reading the author, and I cannot remember this author's name. He said you have to interpret the Old Testament in light of the New. And this is a common evangelical and Reformed idea. I mean, it's a common Christian idea. You interpret the Old in light of the New. The New Testament is the fulfillment, or about the fulfillment of the types of the prophecies of the Old. So this fellow said, do that. And I remember being a 19-year-old Bible school student thinking to myself, excellent. I should interpret the Old Testament in light of the New. And then in a later chapter, when he came to a discussion of how Paul was using the Old Testament, he said, something to the effect of, I have no idea what Paul is doing, why he's doing it, or how he's doing it, but you're not allowed to imitate him. You're not allowed to imitate the apostle who says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. You're not allowed to imitate that guy's exegesis of the Old Testament. At which point I was basically ready to throw that book against the wall. Because 19 years old, not too bright, right? Not too bright a 19-year-old, thought to myself, in an earlier chapter, you said I have to do this, and then when we come to the doing of it, you say I'm not allowed. And this is the problem with the dispensational wing of biblical exegesis. They really see a sharp divide between Old and New Covenants. And I've spoken about it elsewhere, including in an earlier video where I intimated that was a Marcionite tendency, which I still think is true. Whether or not your average Amill or premill Baptist would consider himself a Marcionite or agree with some of the wild things Marcion had to say is another matter altogether. Few men would be willing to do that, but it is a Marcionite-ish kind of a tendency to say of the Old Testament, the apostles read it a certain way, but you're not allowed to read it that way. And this is where I love guys like Jim Jordan, Peter Leithart, Tim Gallant. He's another old friend of mine, and the way they do their readings of the Old Testament. It's a self-conscious attempt to imitate the apostolic reading, and to be imaginative and creative in so doing. And I think it yields some very interesting fruit. It sometimes takes you down a dead end. Like, you can You could spend a vast amount of ink spilled discussing the pomegranates carved in gold around the ceiling of the temple. Whether a discussion of that fruit would be fruitful, well, maybe not. It would be fun. There's also a point to that. What's wrong with the joy of chasing a dead end for a while? You know, now if it's preventing you from doing the basics, then obviously, about face, do the basics. But not all rabbit trails, are wrong. Sometimes a dead end is, it may not get you somewhere, but it might teach you something, right? So don't neglect your duties. Don't neglect the things you ought to do because of an enthusiasm. But not everything is to be avoided, right? If you read any of the medieval scholastics, you'll probably come to the conclusion, if you're a North American evangelical, that was a waste of time. Like, why is Aquinas discussing angels dancing on the head of a pin? Like, how many angels can fit on the head of a pin? Like, that was useless, right? And you're like, well, maybe. I mean, the Bible says absolutely nothing about angels and needles, like nothing about the relationship between those two things. But what Aquinas was attempting was not to make an assertion that the scriptures do say something about that, and it's valuable for housewives who are changing diapers. That's not what he was saying. He was teaching his students how to think, right? So, what kind of properties does a needle have? What kind of properties does an angel have? Do these properties inhabit the same space and time, right? I mean, this is a question, right? But he's teaching his students how to think and how to analyze. And a lot of people mistake, I think, his intent in that moment, simply because we are consumed with a utilitarian ethos, which has its benefits and its shortcomings. The benefits of a utilitarian ethos are that you get practical material results from your intellectual pursuits. Okay, so that's not bad. I mean, somebody has to invent a computer, for example, or the internal combustion engine, right? Magnificent, glorious thing. More good has been done by that thing than many other things. Yeah. But if you have this utilitarian narrowness to your mind, you will have a utilitarian narrowness to your soul and to your values. You begin to value people and the things of this world around you, and the things of the seen and the unseen realms, merely on their utility to you, which is selfish. It is hubris, and I don't think it's philosophically defensible. Like, by what standard do we judge utility? It's a good question. A good evangelical will say, by the standard of the scriptures. Okay, very, very well, very well. So, are we talking about something good for utility in terms of your sanctification? Then a case might be made that the internal combustion engine, which is a very useful thing, is not useful for your sanctification. Now, I would argue the contrary. I've skinned my knuckles in the guts of more than one engine. Very good for your sanctification. You will become a holier man if you approach the skinning of your knuckles and the snapping of no exhaust manifold studs with prayer and thanksgiving. Mm. Those who know, yeah, they know. So, but then you also do have the statement of Paul talking about all of our present suffering is useful for us. Mm. So then you're like, okay, so utility has its place, but if utility is your whole framework, your whole worldview, then you become a very narrow-souled individual, and you treat people in that way as if they have only utility, right? Or and if they don't have utility, then you treat them accordingly. Multi-level marketing, right? That's utilitarianism on a social scale. So too is social Darwinianism and eugenics. This old person who's suffering debilitating arthritis is no longer useful to me or to society, or they've got a cancer, or their liver isn't working right, or whatever. Off with his head, or hit him with a chemical rock and kill him. Well, that's pretty inhumane. That's non-human. That man or that woman made by God in his own image, in the twilight of his life, is now useless. Since when was a man's worth on his utility? Like in economic terms, I could say that I am very much more useful than every barista in town, right? I work in the oil and gas industry, so the GDP relative to my hours working, the GDP I produce for the nation relative to the hours I work to produce it, it's astronomical compared to a barista who makes coffee. But coffee, right? But coffee. My daughter made this coffee. It's fantastic. Um, Boil water, grind beans, mix, wait, press. Perfect. Uh, but that barista is contributing like a magnitude of scale less to the economy by her economic activity than I am. But she's not useless. I'm not better than she is. I'm not more human than she is. She's making coffee. She's paying for what she wants to pay for, what she has to pay for. She's doing the work she's got. There's value in honoring God with your work. The spiritual value is inestimable. So the cup of coffee made in thanksgiving to God, the oil well fracked in thanksgiving to God, these are both good things. Now, apart from gratitude to God, this is not good, right? Coffee made by an embittered soul, or well fracked by an embittered soul, is not good, right? But it's not good or not good based on its economic output. It's good or not good based on one's relationship with God in Jesus Christ and one's obedience to the command to be thankful in everything, to pray without ceasing, to be thankful in everything. Now, Pastor Nathan, my pastor, he preached a sermon on 1 Thessalonians 5 on Sunday, where he references this passage. And fantastic sermon, by the way. Check it out on the church's website, Christ Covenant Church of Grand Prairie, Alberta. But yeah, fantastic sermon. But it impinges on so many things. If you're told to pray without ceasing, then all your activity in life, pray without ceasing. Give thanks for everything. Give thanks in every circumstance, for this is God's will. I really wish, when I was a boy, that passage had been stressed in my hearing in the church I was in. There's a lot of people asking, what's God's will? I want to know what God's will is. And then they're looking at me because I'm, leaving high school and going on to become a man in the world. What is God's will for you? And I'm sitting there like, I have no idea. I don't know. How about rich beyond all dreams and avarice? I'll take that. Well, that in material terms did not happen. Oh well. but rich in many other ways, right? Richer in other ways, more meaningful ways. Uh, but God's will is that you give thanks in everything. So it was also very deeply gratifying during the sermon, or just at the end of the sermon, as we were going into the service of the table. One of my pastor's children was sitting in our row with my family, and just just as he gets to the table, we're talking projectile vomit, just woo. I heard running water, and I'm like, man, that's a weird thing to hear up here in the sanctuary. And I look over, and she's just bucking it out. It was amazing. Um, Again, a circumstance to be thankful for. Uh, Everything, right? It was a good opportunity for my girls to help serve this poor young lady. I think she's 6 now, maybe 7. You know, get her to the bathroom, get her clean up the floor, clean up the wall. Another friend of mine, his 3-year-old boy ran his hands through it. It was just a disaster. It was magnificent. Meanwhile, I'm holding my 1-year-old because she was about ready to run through it all. It was great. It was just mayhem, mayhem. So be thankful in all things. Right? Gratitude. This is the will of God for you. So I've got some good books, some good tobacco, good coffee. I'm gonna do a little bit of writing, I think. Yeah, and be thankful to God for it all. Anyway, thank you, and the Lord bless.